All right, welcome in everyone to the deep dive. We're going to be jumping into a topic today that a lot of you have flagged as being really important, something you want to understand better, and that is personal finance.
Yeah.
And in particular, we're going to be looking at Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad.
Yeah. Great book.
It's a book that's been around for a little while, but it continues to be popular. And I think, one of the reasons is that it does lay out some really core financial philosophies in a way that is, it's meant to be accessible to everyone.
Right.
So we're going to be taking a look at those contrasting ideas, really unpacking them
Yeah.
so you can get to grips with them
Absolutely.
and hopefully start applying some of this stuff to your own life.
I think what really grabs you right at the beginning of the book is the question around education, right? Like, does the education system really set you up for the financial realities that you're going to face in life?
Right.
And Kiyosaki's co-author, Sharon Lechter, who is a CPA, by the way, she tells this very relatable story of pursuing what we're all told is the path to success, right?
Yeah.
Go to college, get good grades, get a good job. She and her husband, Michael, followed that recipe, but then found themselves looking ahead and thinking, wait a minute, we don't have a pension.
Right.
We're relying on our own contributions for retirement. It really gives you cause, right?
Yeah. It makes you think, am I doing the right things?
Exactly.
You tick all the boxes, and then maybe the game has changed.
Maybe the game has changed. And the book really hits on that.
Well, and then she brings in this interesting generational perspective through a conversation she had with her son.
Right.
And he basically pushes back on the whole idea that education automatically leads to wealth. He's like, look at Michael Jordan, look at Madonna, Bill Gates.
These huge names.
People who built incredible success and wealth.
Exactly.
Through totally different paths, not necessarily through the traditional education system.
Absolutely. It challenges that whole notion that academic achievement is the sole path to financial success.
Right, right.
Which is really a core part of what this book is about,
It is, and I think Lechter's own personal story also plays into this because she talked about actively searching for financial education.
Yeah.
For her kids. And this was after her oldest son wrapped up some pretty serious credit card debt.
Right. Very relatable.
Which, as a parent, that's one of your nightmares, right?
Absolutely. That fear of them getting into financial trouble, it's a big one for parents.
Big one. And it's actually what led her to meet Robert Kiyosaki.
Oh, interesting.
Who at the time was actually in the process of trying to get a patent for a financial education product. Yeah. And that was the cash flow game.
Yeah, the cash flow game, which as we'll see is really central to his teaching, really helps to illustrate the concepts.
Yeah, and it's interesting because, before we even get to the game, the book introduces this concept, I think is a very powerful one, the idea of the rat race.
The rat race, yeah.
And it really paints a picture of this treadmill that so many of us get on. You earn money, you spend it, you earn more money, you spend more money.
Right.
And it's often on things that we're told are, markers of success. Mm-hmm. A house, a car, keeping up with, the latest gadgets and trends.
Yeah.
But the book argues these things often turn into liabilities.
Right, sorry.
Things that actually drain your cash rather than building wealth.
Exactly.
And then you add in taxes.
Yeah.
And suddenly you're working harder and harder.
Yeah, and going nowhere.
Just to stay afloat, yeah.
It's that feeling of running just to stay in the same place, right? Like you're not really getting ahead.
Exactly. And the book really challenges that whole idea of, is this the right way to be thinking about money?
Exactly. And it goes on to say that the way out of this rat race, the way to get off that treadmill is through a good understanding of accounting and investing.
Which for a lot of people, those are intimidating subjects, right?
They can be, yeah. They can sound really dry, maybe even a bit scary, like...
It's not how you want to spend your Friday night. Right.
Exactly.
Poring over spreadsheets.
But what's so interesting is that Lechter, who is, as we said, a CPA, she found Kiyosaki's approach to these topics through his cash flow game to be actually engaging.
That's surprising, right?
It is. It's not your typical way of learning about accounting and investing. It's not just lectures and numbers. It's interactive. It's hands-on.
It's fun.
You're actually learning by doing.
Yeah, and Lechter talks about her own experience playing cash flow.
Right.
And as a CPA, she immediately saw how the game mirrored real-world financial situations.
Yeah, like the relationship between the income statement and the balance sheet. These are things that she understood, but the game made them tangible.
Made it real.
And relatable.
Yeah, and she was the first one to get out of the rat race in that initial test group.
Oh, wow.
Which I think is kind of telling.
Yeah, it says something
And it led her to realize that for a lot of people, their financial struggles actually stem from a lack of understanding of those basic principles.
It's not necessarily that they're not smart or capable, but they just haven't been given the tools or the knowledge.
Right. It's not that they're bad with money. It's that they don't really understand how money works.
Exactly.
And the outline mentions those really diverse reactions to the game from that test group.
Yeah.
Which I think is really interesting. You had the computer programmer who was very much like, well, software can do all this.
This is all going to be automated soon.
Right. Why do we even need this human interaction? And then you had the banker.
Oh, right. Someone who knows the numbers.
Someone who had the formal training. But it was like the game actually helped him see how it worked in the real world.
How to actually apply it.
Yeah. And then you had Lecter's daughter.
Yeah, her daughter.
Who, through the game, really grasped the freedom.
Yes.
That financial literacy can provide.
It's not just about being rich, it's about having choices, right?
Exactly.
And she saw that. Like, hey, I could choose a career that I love. I don't have to be driven solely by job security or benefits.
And that's a big shift, right? For someone that young to be having that realization.
Absolutely. It opens up a whole world of possibilities.
And I think that really sets the stage for understanding Kiyosaki himself.
Right.
Because he is presented as this, self-taught, self-made entrepreneur, someone who actually retired, I think it was at 47.
Yeah, very young.
Very young, but then came out of retirement.
Right.
Because he was really concerned about this growing gap between the wealthy and everyone else.
Yeah, that wealth gap.
And he felt like the education system wasn't doing enough to prepare young people for the realities of this new financial world.
Yeah, it's like the old advice of go to school, get good grades, get a safe job is not necessarily...
And not the right advice.
The best advice anyone...
It might even be risky advice.
Potentially, yeah.
In some cases, yeah.
In some cases. And he really challenges that conventional wisdom, right?
He does. He really pushes back on that.
And he does it by arguing that the rich often play by a different set of rules.
Yeah, different rules of the game.
Different rules of the game.
Yeah.
And he gives the example of corporate downsizing.
Okay.
Right? Where companies lay off employees. And those people, they're obviously facing job losses, financial uncertainty. It's a tough situation. But often, when that happens, the company's stock price actually goes up.
Interesting.
Which benefits the shareholders, right?
Yeah.
The owners and the investors. So you see this contrast, these different outcomes.
Different sides of the same coin, yeah.
Exactly. And his point is, these rules of money, they're not taught in school.
Not part of the curriculum.
No, not at all.
Right. And that leads into this really crucial point about the role of parents.
Yeah.
So if the schools aren't teaching it, then it kind of falls on the parents, right?
Right.
To educate their kids about money.
Well, he argues that it does. He says in wealthy families, these conversations are happening around the dinner table.
Right. It's just part of the fabric of life.
Exactly. It's not this taboo topic. It's something that's talked about openly.
Yeah.
And he even encourages parents to really guide their kids to think beyond just being a good employee, to think about maybe becoming owners or investors themselves.
Yeah, plant those seeds early. Right?
Exactly. Expand their thinking about money.
Expand their possibilities.
And Kiyosaki actually defines financial intelligence as the mental process you use to solve financial problems.
Okay.
So it's not just about having knowledge, it's about how you think about money.
Right.
And he stresses that this is a skill that can be developed like any other skill.
You can learn it.
You can learn it.
Yeah, and it's really about preparing for an uncertain future by, as Lecter says, playing it smart with your money.
Playing it smart, yeah.
And a huge part of that playing it smart is mindset.
Mindset, yes.
And the book uses this concept of the two dads.
Yeah.
The poor dad and the rich dad.
Right. Two very different ways of thinking about money.
And it's not about, their actual wealth. It's about their mentality.
It's their philosophy.
Yeah. And the rich dad would encourage questions.
Questions
like, how can I afford this?
Right. Forcing you to think.
Which makes you think, right? Problem solve.
Yeah.
Whereas the poor dad would often just say,
I can't afford that.
End of discussion. Shut down.
And that's it. No further thought.
It's subtle, but it's so powerful.
It's a huge difference in how you approach, challenges, especially financial challenges.
And this really shapes their entire approach to to money.
The whole philosophy, yeah. I mean, the poor dad often believed the rich should be taxed more heavily, while the rich dad saw that as potentially hindering productivity.
Two totally different views.
Right. And they had opposing views on career paths. One valuing that security of working for a stable company, the other one thinking about the potential of owning a business.
Yeah, and even their views on how children factor into their financial motivation were different.
Right.
The rich dad was all about open discussions about money.
Money shouldn't be a taboo topic.
Right, whereas the poor dad would often avoid those conversations.
Keep it quiet.
Yeah, and then their attitudes towards risk.
Yeah.
Totally different.
They are opposites.
Rich dad was all about understanding and managing risk, and the poor dad was much more about safety and security.
Play it safe. Don't rock the boat.
And I think Lecter makes a really good point about this, reflecting on the influence these two different viewpoints had on her. And she really stresses the importance of being aware.
Being aware, yeah.
Of the thoughts and beliefs you adopt about money.
Right, because they really shape your reality.
They do, yeah.
Yep.
And that core principle of the rich dad making money work for him, it's like a complete reversal.
Flipping the script.
Flipping the script, yeah, of just working for a paycheck.
Right.
Which is, I think, where those practical lessons in the book really come in.
And the book illustrates these early lessons with this great story. It goes back to Kiyosaki's childhood.
Yeah, tell me about this.
So he and his friend, Mike, driven by that, childhood entrepreneurial spirit, they decided to make money by, get this, casting lead nickels.
Lead nickels.
Lead nickels. Yeah. Can you picture these two kids in their makeshift workshop?
Totally. Yeah. Little entrepreneur.
Right. But of course, it quickly turned into a bit of a sobering lesson because what they were doing was actually illegal.
Counterfeiting.
Yeah. So it's a funny story, but also a reminder, you got to understand the rules of the game.
Got to play by the rules.
But even in that disappointment, there's a turning point.
Okay.
Kiyosaki's poor dad, even though he admitted he didn't know a lot about making money,
yeah,
he gave them a crucial piece of advice. He said, go talk to Mike's dad.
Mike's dad.
His own banker actually admired Mike's dad for his business sense.
Interesting.
So this is how Mike's dad is introduced as this rich dad figure.
Okay, the mentor.
The mentor, and their first encounter is really interesting. He's not this, stereotypical image of a wealthy businessman.
Yeah, not flashing the cash.
No, not at all. He's in work clothes. Seems pretty modest, but you can tell he's successful.
Okay.
And he offers the boys a job at his convenience store, 10 cents an hour.
10 cents an hour.
3 hours every Saturday. Take it or leave it.
Not exactly enticing.
Not exactly. And the work is tedious, just dusting cans for hours.
Oh, man.
And Kiyosaki understandably wants to quit after 3 weeks. He's like, I'm not learning anything. I'm a slave for 10 cents an hour.
That's what he felt like, yeah.
And it's at that moment when he complains to Mike's dad about the pay that the first real lesson begins.
Okay, so what happens?
So the rich dad challenges him, right? He says, look beyond the frustration. What are you actually learning here?
Okay.
And he points out, blaming others, it's a trap.
It is a trap.
It's a way of avoiding responsibility. And then he drops this bomb. The poor and the middle class work for money. The rich have money work for them. Boom. It's a complete mind shift.
Totally different way of thinking.
And he goes on to say that the things that keep people in the rat race are fear and greed.
Fear and greed, classic motivators.
Right. Fear of not having enough and wanting more and more.
Yeah, and that drives people to
spend more, to take on more debt, even as they earn more.
So it's not just about how much you make. It's about
your mindset around money.
Yeah, how you handle those emotions.
Absolutely. And he uses this great example of the town derelict and a dollar bill.
Okay, how does that fit in?
He's making the point that avoiding money altogether
can
be just as problematic as being too attached to it.
Interesting, yeah.
It's about finding a healthy balance.
Right, a healthy relationship.
And he says fear often dictates how we react to money.
Yeah.
So when we're short on cash, the immediate reaction is often to go get a job.
Any job, yeah.
Any job, right. But that might not be the best long-term solution.
Right, it's a Band-Aid.
It's a Band-Aid.
Yeah.
So the real lesson here is learn to manage your fear and your desire.
Don't let them control you.
Don't let them control you.
Yeah, and it's not just about becoming wealthy. It's about
not becoming a slave to your own emotions.
Not being a slave to those emotions, exactly.
And he links ignorance about money to those negative emotions being amplified.
Okay, so the less you know,
the more fearful and greedy you become.
Makes sense.
Right. He gives the example of a doctor who raises fees just because they want more money, even though it hurts people who need medical care.
So financial education could actually lead to...
more informed decisions and potentially a more equitable system.
Right. That's a good point.
And then he makes this key distinction between making money and working for it.
Okay, this is interesting.
He actually says the boys, with their lead nickels, they were closer to the mindset of making money.
Oh, whoa.
Because they were trying to create it.
Yeah.
Of course, illegally, but he clarifies the difference between legal and illegal ways to generate wealth.
Right. Stay on the right side of the law.
And he emphasizes that money itself is an illusion.
An illusion.
In a way, yes. It's something we collectively believe in, but if you don't understand it, it can control you.
Oh, I see what you mean.
He uses the analogy of the donkey's carrot, constantly chasing something that's just out of reach.
Right. Always working for that next paycheck.
Always working for that next paycheck.
And his perspective on the gold standard, I found that fascinating.
Yeah, he had concerns about the U.S. going off the gold standard. And he felt it would have a negative impact, especially on those who believed in the inherent value of paper money.
Those who didn't really understand how money worked.
Exactly.
And as he was leaving, he gave the boys one final piece of advice.
Okay, what was that?
Keep working at the store, but change your focus.
Change your focus.
Instead of needing a paycheck, use your brain to find ways to actually make money.
So it's a shift in perspective.
It is, yeah. And he argued that this would allow them to see opportunities that others miss.
Because they're so focused on the traditional way of doing things.
Right, the traditional job, the traditional paycheck.
He used this metaphor of the tar baby.
The tar baby? What's that?
It's like this trap you get stuck in.
Okay, got it.
Don't let those limiting beliefs hold you back.
And that shift in perspective, it actually led to their first successful business venture.
Oh, right. Tell me about this.
The comic book lending library.
The comic book lending library.
So by working for free at the store, they had to think outside the box.
Yeah, they had to get creative.
And they came up with this idea that could generate income.
Even when they weren't physically there.
Which is the essence of having money work for you, right?
That's it. That's the core principle.
And it leads perfectly into lesson 2. Why teach financial literacy?
Why teach financial literacy, yes.
And the book stresses that it's not just about how much you make.
It's about how much you keep.
And there are some really powerful examples in there about people like lottery winners.
Oh, right, yeah.
And professional athletes who make huge amounts of money.
But they lose it all.
They end up losing it all.
Because they don't have that financial foundation.
Right. They didn't learn how to manage it.
Exactly.
And the book uses this analogy of, building a skyscraper without a foundation.
Oh, yeah, that's a good word.
If you just focus on getting rich quick, without that solid base.
You're setting yourself up for trouble.
You're on shaky ground.
Shaky ground.
And that foundational knowledge, according to the book, is accounting.
Accounting, the language of business.
Yeah, but it's presented in a way that's not intimidating.
Right.
It's about understanding the basics.
Right, the fundamentals.
Especially when you're teaching kids.
Yeah.
Keep it simple, use visuals, clear language.
Yeah, make it fun, make it relatable.
And then, of course, we get to the core definitions, assets and liabilities.
The building blocks.
Yeah, and they're defined very clearly.
An asset puts money in your pocket.
And a liability takes money out.
Rule number 1, know the difference.
Know the difference. Buy assets.
Buy assets.
And it seems so simple.
It does.
But the book argues that most financial struggles
stem from not understanding this basic distinction.
Yeah, people buy liabilities thinking they're assets.
Right, or they don't understand the long-term consequences.
And then the book illustrates this with those cash flow patterns.
Oh, yeah, those diagrams are really helpful.
The poor, their income goes straight to expenses.
Right.
The middle class, they have expenses, but then also a big chunk going towards liabilities.
The mortgage, the car loans.
Yeah, credit cards.
And the wealthy, their assets are generating income.
Putting money back in their pockets.
That's the key difference.
And it's so interesting how it's visually represented.
It really helps to clarify, those different paths.
Yeah, and the book also makes the point that simply having more money
without understanding these patterns
doesn't solve the trial.
It can actually make it worse.
Yeah, if you tend to spend everything you earn, more money just means more spending.
Right, you're not changing the underlying behavior.
And they paint this really relatable picture of the financial dream turning into a nightmare.
Oh, right, the young couple.
The young couple, they start out frugal, but then
they get the bigger house.
Yeah, the car, the credit cards, and suddenly
they're trapped.
They're in the rat race.
Even though they're making more money.
Yeah, And that pressure to keep up with the Joneses.
It's a powerful force.
It is, yeah. And it drives so much of that spending.
It keeps people from building real wealth.
And then, in contrast to this, we see Kiyosaki and his friend Mike getting this real-world education.
Oh, yeah, from Mike's dad.
Just by sitting in on his meetings.
With his bankers, his lawyers, his accountants.
So they're learning practical stuff.
Things that they wouldn't learn in school.
And Mike's dad, he's also teaching them about how to think.
He's always questioning the status quo, right?
Yeah, he's not just accepting things.
Not doing things just because that's how it's always been done.
And that leads the book to challenge this widely held belief about your house being an asset.
Right, that your house is your biggest investment.
Yeah, and they break down the cost of home ownership.
The mortgage interest, the property taxes, the maintenance.
All of that.
And then they point out, that money could be invested elsewhere.
Right, opportunity cost.
Opportunity cost.
And it goes back to that central theme. The wealthy focus on acquiring assets.
Things that put money in their pocket.
Whereas the middle class often focuses on
liabilities.
Things that take money out.
And that difference in focus
is a big reason for the wealth gap.
Absolutely.
And that takes us into lesson 3. Mind your own business.
Mind your own business, yeah.
And the example they use is Ray Krocking.
Ray Kroc, McDonald's.
Everyone thinks of McDonald's as, hamburgers.
Right, the food business.
But his focus was on the real estate.
The underlying real estate.
Yeah, acquiring the land. And it highlights that difference between your profession, what you do to earn money, and your business, which is your assets that are working for you.
Generating income even when you're not working.
And they go on to define what they consider to be true assets.
Okay, what are they?
Businesses that you don't have to be actively involved in.
Passive income.
Stocks, bonds, mutual funds, income-generating real estate, notes, royalties.
Anything that produces income or appreciates.
And has a ready market.
Yeah, you can sell it if you need to.
And there's that emphasis on loving your assets.
Loving your assets.
Now, if you don't enjoy them,
you're not going to take care of them.
You're not going to be as invested in them.
Makes sense.
And then lesson 4 is about the power of corporations.
Corporations.
And they give a bit of a history lesson about taxes.
Oh, right.
How they initially targeted the rich, but eventually impacted the middle class as well.
Everyone's paying taxes now.
But the rich often use corporations as a way to
protect their assets
and legally reduce their tax burden.
It's not about evading taxes. It's about
understanding the rules and using them to your advantage.
Right, using the system legally.
And then lesson 5 is a bit more conceptual. The rich invent money.
The rich invent money. Interesting.
And this is about, it's not just about knowledge.
It's about creativity, courage, overcoming self-doubt.
Thinking outside the box.
Right, seeing opportunities that others don't.
And they argue that this is even more important in today's world,
where things are changing so quickly.
Yeah, the old rules might not apply anymore.
You gotta be adaptable.
And they talk about financial IQ as being a combination of things.
Okay, like what?
Accounting, investing, marketing, law.
So it's not just about being a numbers person.
No, it's about understanding how all these pieces fit together.
It's a holistic view.
And the rich dad actually advised to know a little about a lot.
Versus being a specialist.
Which goes against the traditional advice, right?
Yeah, specialize, become an expert in one thing.
But they argue that a broader understanding is more valuable.
Especially in the pursuit of wealth.
And the book also touches on this, kind of concerning reality about retirement and Social Security.
Yeah, those safety nets might not be as secure as they used to be.
Less and less pensions.
And Social Security, Medicare, who knows what's going to happen with those programs.
So it's more important than ever to
take control of your own financial future.
Exactly. And the advice to work to learn rather than just work for money.
That's a good one.
Especially in today's job market.
Things are changing so fast.
You got to be constantly learning.
And they emphasize those key management skills like understanding cash flow.
Managing systems, working with people.
And also specialized skills like sales, understanding markets.
All really valuable.
Absolutely. And then there's this interesting section about the law of giving.
The law of giving, yeah.
And they contrast the two dads' approaches to charity.
Okay.
The rich dad actually emphasized giving first.
Giving first.
It's almost like this, what goes around comes around.
Kind of a karma thing, yeah.
Yeah, but applied to finances.
Interesting.
And lesson 8 is about overcoming the fear of losing money.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
It's a universal fear, right?
Everyone has it to some degree.
But the book says the key difference is how you handle that fear.
Not letting it paralyze you.
Exactly. They use the Texan attitude as an example.
Go big or go home.
Remember the Alamo.
That kind of mentality.
Right, a different perspective on risk and failure.
And they caution against listening to fearful people.
The chicken littles.
Always predicting doom and gloom.
Yeah, and they say it's important to get diverse perspectives.
Do your own research.
Trust your own judgment.
And the book also talks about the power of information.
Information and knowledge, yeah.
Wealth is often created through having the right information.
And while they caution against illegal insider trading, they do emphasize the value of having well-informed friends.
People you can learn from.
People who can give you insights.
And then there's lesson 7, which is about paying yourself first.
Paying yourself first, okay.
And this is the concept of putting money aside.
Before you pay your bills?
For your assets, your investments.
So it's a shift in priority.
Yeah, investing in your future first.
And it can have a huge impact in the long run.
It can, yeah. And they also highlight the importance of good advisors.
Financial advisors.
Yeah, finding someone you trust.
And paying them well.
Because good advice is valuable.
It can save you money in the long run.
And then there's this idea of being an Indian giver in investing.
Yeah.
Expert.